The crackling flames had stolen everything from Beatrice Miller except her life, and sometimes she wondered if that was truly a mercy at all. In the sweltering heat of Tropic, Utah Territory, in the summer of 1884, most folks stayed indoors during the afternoon hours, but Beatrice preferred the solitude that came with the scorching sun. Fewer people meant fewer stares, fewer gasps, fewer children hiding behind their mothers' skirts. The burns that covered the left side of her face and neck, snaking down her arm like angry red vines, had become her identity in this small town. 3 years had passed since the night her family's ranch house caught fire. 3 years since she lost her parents and younger brother. 3 years since she became the monster that mothers warned their children about in whispered tones. She pulled her wide-brimmed hat lower, the shadow cutting across her scarred features as she hurried from the general store toward the small cabin she now called home on the edge of town. The paper-wrapped supplies pressed against her chest, a barrier between herself and the world. Her good hand clutched the package tightly while her scarred arm hung at her side, the damaged skin pulled tight and shiny in places, rough and uneven in others. "Miss Miller," a voice called out, deep and unfamiliar. Beatrice quickened her pace, her heart hammering. She had learned that strangers were either overly curious or overly kind, and she could not decide which was worse. "Miss Miller, please wait." The desperation in his tone made her stop despite every instinct screaming at her to keep walking. She turned slowly, keeping her scarred side angled away, her face down. The man stood perhaps 10 feet away, dust covering his worn boots and the hem of his dark pants. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work, and a face that carried both youth and experience in equal measure. He could not have been much older than her own 22 years, maybe 25 at most. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, warm and steady, and his dark hair curled slightly beneath the rim of his hat. "I apologize for startling you, madam," he said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. "My name is Isaac Taylor. I just arrived in town this morning and I am looking for someone who might know the land around here. The man at the general store said you grew up on a ranch nearby, that you would know the territory better than most." "He should not have told you that," Beatrice said quietly, her voice barely carrying across the distance between them. She kept her face turned, showing him only the right side, the unmarred side. "I cannot help you, please," Isaac said, taking a step closer. Beatrice immediately stepped back. He froze, seeming to understand her need for distance. "I am trying to find a place to settle, to start fresh. I have some money saved, enough to buy land and start a small ranch, but I am new to Utah Territory and I do not want to make a foolish purchase. I just need someone to point me in the right direction, tell me what to look for, what to avoid." "Ask someone else," Beatrice said, turning to leave. "There is no one else," Isaac called after her. "At least, no one else who will talk to me. Seems folks around here do not take kindly to strangers asking questions." Despite herself, Beatrice felt a flicker of sympathy. She knew what it was like to be an outsider, to be treated as something foreign and unwelcome. Still, she could not help him. Helping him would mean spending time with him, would mean him seeing her face, really seeing it, and she could not bear another person's pity or disgust. "I am sorry," she said over her shoulder, and she meant it. She made it 3 more steps before he spoke again. "The storekeeper said you lost your family in a fire." Beatrice stopped, her entire body going rigid. "I lost mine too," Isaac continued, his voice softer now. "Not to fire, but to cholera, 6 months back. My parents, my 2 sisters. I understand loss, Miss Miller. I understand wanting to be left alone with your grief. But I also understand that sometimes we have to keep living anyway, even when it feels impossible." Slowly, Beatrice turned back to face him, still keeping her scarred side hidden. "Why did you come here?" "To Tropic." Isaac looked around at the red rock cliffs surrounding the small town, at the dusty street and handful of buildings that made up the settlement. "I heard it was new, still growing. Thought maybe a place that was still finding itself might be more welcoming to a man trying to do the same." "And is it?" A rueful smile crossed his face. "Not particularly." Beatrice felt something shift inside her, some small crack in the wall she had built around herself. "Meet me at sunrise tomorrow at the north end of town, near the old cottonwood tree. Bring your horse and supplies for a day's ride. I will show you the land." Isaac's face brightened. "Thank you, Miss Miller. I truly appreciate it." "Do not thank me yet," Beatrice said. "And do not expect conversation. I will show you what you need to see, and then we part ways." "Understood," Isaac said, placing his hat back on his head. Beatrice turned and walked away quickly, her heart racing for reasons she could not quite name. She had just agreed to spend an entire day with a stranger, something she had not done since the fire. What had she been thinking? He would see her face in the full light of day. He would see the extent of the damage, the twisted skin, the way her left eye pulled slightly at the corner, the way her ear was partially melted into the side of her head. That night, she lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, running her fingers over the scars on her arm. They were numb in some places, hypersensitive in others. The doctors had done what they could, but there was only so much medicine could do against such extensive burns. She had been lucky, they said. The flames had only caught one side of her body before her father had thrown her from the second-story window. He had died going back for her brother. Her mother had died in the initial collapse of the roof. Lucky. Yes, she felt extraordinarily lucky. As dawn broke over the red cliffs, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Beatrice made her way to the cottonwood tree. She wore her usual long sleeves despite the heat, and her hat was pulled low. She had brought her horse, Copper, a gentle mare that had survived the fire and had been her only companion these past 3 years. Isaac was already waiting. He sat on a sturdy bay gelding, his supplies neatly packed, and his expression one of genuine relief when he saw her approach. "I was afraid you might change your mind," he admitted. "I almost did," Beatrice said honestly, mounting Copper with practiced ease. They rode in silence for the first hour, heading out into the desert landscape dotted with juniper and sagebrush. Beatrice led them along familiar paths, trails she had ridden countless times as a child. The morning air was cool, and she was grateful for the respite from the usual heat. "That ridge to the east," Beatrice finally said, pointing with her good hand. "The land beyond it has good grazing in the spring, but the summer dries it up quick. Any rancher working that area needs to have water rights to the creek, or your cattle will not make it through the hot months." Isaac nodded, his eyes following her gesture. "What about to the south?" "Rougher terrain, but it stays greener longer. There are springs scattered through those hills. Harder to work, but more reliable water." They continued on, Beatrice pointing out various features of the land, explaining the challenges and benefits of different areas. Isaac listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed he knew ranching, even if he did not know this particular territory. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became oppressive. They stopped near a small spring to water the horses and rest in the shade of a rock outcropping. Beatrice positioned herself carefully, keeping her left side away from Isaac, but she could feel his gaze on her. "You can take your hat off if you want," Isaac said, taking a drink from his canteen. "I am not going to judge you." Beatrice stiffened. "You do not know what you are talking about." "Maybe not," Isaac agreed. But I can see you are uncomfortable in this heat, and we are the only two people for miles. Please do not look at me, Beatrice said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. When I turn around, when you see, please just do not look. Isaac was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? Beatrice did not respond, but she did not walk away either. My youngest sister, Mary, she had a birthmark that covered half her face. Dark purple, impossible to hide. Our whole life people stared at her, made comments, acted like she was some kind of curiosity. But Mary was the kindest, funniest person I have ever known. She could make anyone laugh, could see the good in everything. Toward the end, when the cholera had her, she made me promise something. What? Beatrice asked despite herself. She made me promise that I would always look at people, really look at them and try to see what mattered. Not the outside things, but the true things underneath. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. That is a nice story, but you still have not seen my face. Then show me, Isaac said simply. With trembling hands, Beatrice removed her hat. Then, slowly, she turned to face him fully, showing him the left side of her face. The scarred tissue pulled tight across her cheek, distorting her features. Her left ear was partially gone, melted into scar tissue. The burns continued down her neck and disappeared beneath her collar. She forced herself to look at him, to see the inevitable disgust or pity. But Isaac just looked at her, his whiskey-colored eyes steady and calm. He did not flinch, did not look away, did not let his expression change to one of horror. "Your eyes are beautiful," he said finally. "The most striking shade of green I have ever seen." Beatrice let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You are looking at my face, at these scars, and you comment on my eyes." "Should I comment on something else?" Isaac asked. "Because I could mention that you have a lovely nose, or that you have a very determined chin, or that when you talk about the land, your whole face lights up with passion and knowledge." "I could mention any number of things, Miss Miller, because there are any number of things to see when I look at you." "You do not have to be kind," Beatrice whispered. "I am not being kind," Isaac said firmly. "I am being honest. Yes, I can see you were burned, but that is not all I see. I see a woman who knows this land like the back of her hand. I see someone who has survived something terrible and kept going. I see someone who agreed to help a stranger even though it clearly made her uncomfortable. Those things matter a lot more than some scars." Beatrice sat down heavily on a nearby rock, suddenly exhausted. "You do not understand what it is like. The way people look at me, the way children cry, the way men turn away. I am a monster in their eyes." Isaac sat down near her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Then they are fools." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle burbling of the spring and the occasional stamp of a horse's hoof. Finally, Beatrice spoke again. "There is a property about 5 miles southwest of here. It belonged to the Anderson family, but they moved back east 2 years ago. Good land, decent water access, and a sturdy barn already built. The house needs work, but the bones are sound. If you are serious about starting a ranch, that would be a good place to start." "Will you show me?" Isaac asked. Beatrice nodded. "That is what I said I would do." They remounted and continued on, but something had shifted between them. The silence was no longer awkward but comfortable. When they reached the Anderson property, Isaac rode around slowly, examining everything with a careful eye. "This is perfect," he said finally. "How much do you think they would want for it?" "I do not know," Beatrice admitted, "but I know where they moved to in case you want to write them." "Would you help me with that?" Isaac asked. "I am not much for writing letters." Beatrice hesitated. Helping him find land was one thing. Continuing to help him, to spend more time with him, that was something else entirely. "I will pay you for your time," Isaac added quickly. "It is only fair." "I do not want your money," Beatrice said. "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. What did she want? She wanted her family back. She wanted her face back. She wanted her old life back. But none of those things were possible. "I want you to stop looking at me like I am some kind of charity case," she said finally. "I do not look at you that way," Isaac said. "I look at you like someone I would like to know better." Beatrice felt heat rise in her cheeks on both sides of her face. "Why?" "Because in the few hours I have known you, you have been more honest and genuine than anyone I have met in months. Because you know things I need to learn. Because you understand loss, and sometimes that is the most important thing two people can share." "Fine," Beatrice said abruptly. "I will help you with the letter, but that is all." But it was not all. Over the following weeks, as Isaac worked to purchase the Anderson property and begin repairs on the house, Beatrice found herself drawn back to his land again and again. At first, she told herself it was just to check on his progress, to make sure he was not making foolish mistakes. But as the days turned into weeks, she had to admit the truth, at least to herself. She enjoyed his company. Isaac never treated her differently because of her scars. He did not try to avoid looking at her, but he also did not stare. He simply talked to her like a normal person, asking her opinions, laughing at her dry observations about the other townspeople, sharing his own dreams and plans for his ranch. "I want to breed horses," he told her one evening as they sat on his newly repaired porch, watching the sun set over the red cliffs. "Good-working horses, sturdy and smart. There is always a need for quality horses out here." "That is a good plan," Beatrice said. "The land here is good for it. Plenty of room to let them run, good grasses in the spring." "Would you help me?" Isaac asked. "I know horses, but you know this territory. You would be invaluable." "I could not," Beatrice said automatically. "Why not?" Because people would talk. Because it would not be proper. Because I cannot be seen with you like that." Isaac turned to look at her. "Cannot be seen with me or cannot be seen at all." Beatrice stood up abruptly. "I should go. It is getting late." "Beatrice, wait." It was the first time he had used her first name, and it stopped her in her tracks. "I am sorry. I pushed too hard, but I meant what I said. I would value your help, not just with the horses, but with everything. You could work here as a proper employee if that makes you more comfortable. Room and board plus wages." "You cannot afford that yet," Beatrice said practically. "Not yet," Isaac admitted. "But in a few months, once I get the first horse sales. Think about it at least." Beatrice nodded and left quickly, riding Copper back to her cabin in the gathering darkness. Her mind was whirling. The offer was tempting, more tempting than it should be. Working with horses again, being out on the land, doing something productive instead of hiding in her cabin or making quick trips to town for supplies. But it would mean spending every day with Isaac, and that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. She was starting to care for him. Not just appreciate his kindness, but truly care. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing, looking forward to their conversations. And that was dangerous. Because while Isaac might be kind enough to look past her scars now, eventually he would want more from life. He would want a wife, a family, a normal life. And that was something she could never give him. What woman would want to be seen with her at a wedding? What children would not run from her in fear? She had accepted her isolation as the price of her survival, but now Isaac was making her want things she had convinced herself were impossible. The next few days, Beatrice stayed away from Isaac's ranch. She told herself it was for the best, that she needed to put distance between them before her feelings grew any stronger. But on the fourth day, Isaac came to her cabin. She saw him riding up and considered not answering the door. But Copper whinnied in the small corral beside the cabin, greeting his horse, and there was no pretending she was not home. "Beatrice," Isaac called, knocking on the door. "Are you all right? I was worried when you did not come by." She opened the door a crack, keeping her body behind it. "I am fine. I have just been busy." "Busy with what?" "That is none of your concern." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "You are right. I am sorry for intruding, but I wanted to let you know that I bought 3 mares yesterday. Good bloodlines, strong build. I am going to pick them up next week, and I was hoping you might come with me to make sure I am not getting cheated, but I understand if you cannot." Beatrice felt herself wavering. "Where are they?" "A ranch about a day's ride north. The owner is retiring, selling off his stock." "A day's ride." That would mean traveling together, possibly staying overnight somewhere. That would mean spending extended time with Isaac, time that would only make her feelings stronger. "Please," Isaac said. "I trust your judgment more than my own on this." "Fine," Beatrice said, opening the door fully. She was still wearing her hat, but she did not bother angling her face away anymore. "But I want one of the mares." Isaac looked surprised. "What? If I am going to help you, I want payment. One of the mares. I will breed her myself, start rebuilding what I lost." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face. "You are thinking about my offer, about working with me." "Maybe," Beatrice admitted. "But I need to know I can do this on my own too. I will not be dependent on anyone ever again." "That is fair," Isaac said. "We will pick out the best mare together, and she is yours." They left 3 days later, riding out in the early morning to make the most of the cooler hours. The journey north took them through some of the most beautiful country Beatrice had ever seen, red rock formations rising like cathedrals against the impossibly blue sky. "It never stops amazing me," Isaac said, looking around. "This land. It is so different from where I grew up in Missouri. Everything there is green and soft. This is all edges and extremes." "But it is beautiful in its own way," Beatrice said. "More than beautiful," Isaac agreed. "It feels honest somehow, like it is showing you exactly what it is, not trying to hide anything." Beatrice glanced at him, wondering if he was talking about more than just the landscape. They reached the ranch by late afternoon. The owner, a grizzled man named Tom Peterson, showed them the horses he had for sale. Beatrice examined each one carefully, checking their teeth, their hooves, their overall conformation. 2 of them were excellent, clearly well-bred and well cared for. The third had a slight unevenness in her gait that concerned Beatrice. "That one has an old injury," she told Isaac quietly. "She is favoring her right front leg. She might be fine for breeding, but I would not pay full price for her." Isaac nodded and negotiated with Peterson accordingly. They settled on a price for all 3 horses, with the injured one discounted significantly. As the sun was setting, Peterson offered them supper and beds in his barn. "My wife passed 2 years ago," he explained, "and I do not keep the guest rooms anymore, but the barn is clean and I have plenty of spare bedding." "That would be appreciated," Isaac said, glancing at Beatrice to make sure she was comfortable with the arrangement. She nodded. After a simple but filling meal of beef stew and fresh bread, they settled into the barn. Peterson had set up 2 separate areas with blankets and pillows, one on each side of the barn, a respectful distance apart. Beatrice lay in her makeshift bed, listening to the gentle sounds of the horses shifting in their stalls. Across the barn, she could hear Isaac's breathing, slow and steady. "Beatrice," he said quietly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for coming. You were right about that 3rd mare. I would not have noticed her injury on my own. You are welcome." Silence fell again, but Beatrice could tell neither of them was sleeping. "Can I ask you something?" Isaac said. "I suppose. What was it like? Before the fire, what was your life like?" Beatrice was quiet for so long that Isaac probably thought she was not going to answer. But finally she spoke. "It was good. Simple but good. My father taught me everything about ranching, about the land. He always said I had a better head for it than my brother, though he would have been the one to inherit. My mother taught me reading and numbers. We did not have much, but we had each other. And then one night, a lantern got knocked over. Everything burned so fast. My father threw me out the window. I broke my arm in the fall, but it healed. He went back in for my brother, for my mother. None of them came back out. I am so sorry, Isaac said, and his voice was thick with emotion. What about you? Beatrice asked, wanting to turn the conversation away from her own pain. What was your family like? Loud, Isaac said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. My mother was always singing, my father was always laughing. My sisters were always arguing about something or other. Our house was never quiet. After they died, the silence was the worst part. I could not stand to be in that house anymore, with all that silence pressing down on me. That is why I had to leave, had to come somewhere new. Do you think we ever stop missing them? Beatrice asked. No, Isaac said honestly. But I think maybe the missing becomes part of who we are instead of all we are. At least, that is what I hope. They talked late into the night, sharing memories of their families, the good times and the hard times. Beatrice told him about teaching her brother to ride, about her mother's terrible cooking and her father's worse singing. Isaac told her about Mary's pranks, about his older sister's dreams of becoming a teacher, about his father's terrible jokes that always made everyone groan. As Beatrice finally drifted off to sleep, she realized she felt lighter than she had in years. Talking about her family, remembering them as they were before the tragedy, had been painful but also healing. And sharing it with someone who truly understood loss made it easier to bear. The next morning, they set out early with the 3 mares in tow. The journey back to Tropic took longer with the extra horses, and they had to stop frequently to rest them. It was late afternoon when they finally reached Isaac's ranch. Which one do you want? Isaac asked as they got the horses settled in the corral. Beatrice studied the 3 mares carefully. The 2 healthier ones would be better for breeding, would produce stronger foals. But her eyes kept going back to the 3rd mare, the one with the old injury. There was something in her eyes, a spark of spirit despite whatever pain she had endured. That one, Beatrice said, pointing to the injured mare. Isaac looked surprised. But she is the one with the bad leg. She is also the one who needs someone to believe in her, Beatrice said. Besides, her injury is not that severe. With proper care she will be fine, and look at her bloodlines, her conformation. She has good breeding in her. Isaac smiled. You see yourself in her. Beatrice bristled. I did not say that. You did not have to. Beatrice turned to face him, ready to argue, but the expression on his face stopped her. He was not mocking her or pitying her. He was looking at her with something that looked dangerously like admiration. I should go, Beatrice said, suddenly nervous. It is getting late. Or you could stay for supper, Isaac suggested. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and bacon. Isaac. Just supper, Beatrice. As friends. As partners, maybe, if you have thought any more about my offer. Beatrice hesitated, but the truth was, she did not want to go back to her lonely cabin. She did not want to leave Isaac's company, did not want to stop feeling like a normal person for a while longer. Fine, she said, but I am cooking. Your beans are terrible. Isaac laughed, the sound rich and warm. I will not argue with that. They went into the small house and Beatrice took stock of Isaac's supplies. He had the basics, but not much else. She managed to put together a decent meal of fried potatoes, bacon, and eggs from his small chicken coop. As they ate, Isaac said, I need to go into town tomorrow to file the paperwork for the horses. Come with me. Beatrice shook her head immediately. No, you know I avoid town as much as possible. I know, but you cannot hide forever, Beatrice. And maybe if people see you with me, see that I treat you like a normal person, they will start to do the same. Or they will just think you are as strange as I am. Then we can be strange together." Beatrice wanted to say no. Every instinct told her to refuse. But a small, hopeful part of her wondered if Isaac might be right. Maybe if she stopped hiding so much, people would eventually stop treating her like a monster. "Fine," she said, "but I am not staying in town any longer than necessary." The next day they rode into Tropic together. Beatrice wore her usual hat and long sleeves, but she did not hang back or try to hide as much as she normally did. Having Isaac beside her gave her a strange sort of courage. People noticed, of course. Heads turned, whispers started. But Isaac seemed oblivious to it all, chatting with her easily as they rode down the main street. When they stopped at the land office, he held the door open for her and introduced her to the clerk as his partner. "Partner," the clerk, a thin man named Harold, said with raised eyebrows. "Yes," Isaac said firmly. "Miss Miller will be helping me establish my horse breeding operation. She has invaluable knowledge of the local territory." Harold looked between them, clearly unsure what to make of this arrangement. But Isaac's tone left no room for argument, so he simply processed the paperwork and sent them on their way. "Partner," Beatrice said once they were back outside. Isaac shrugged. "Well, are you not? You are helping me, I am paying you with one of the mares. That makes us partners, does it not?" "I suppose," Beatrice admitted. As they walked toward the general store to pick up supplies, they nearly ran into Clara Simmons, one of the town's most prominent women. Clara was known for her charity work and her tendency to involve herself in everyone's business. "Isaac Taylor," Clara said, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "I heard you bought the Anderson place. How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you, Mrs. Simmons," Isaac said politely. "May I introduce my business partner, Beatrice Miller?" Clara's eyes flicked to Beatrice, taking in the scars that were partially visible beneath the brim of her hat. To her credit, Clara's expression barely changed. "Miss Miller, yes, I know of you. It is good to see you in town. You keep so much to yourself these days." "I prefer it that way," Beatrice said quietly. "Well, perhaps now that you are working with Mr. Taylor we will see more of you. It is not healthy being so isolated." Clara turned back to Isaac. "You must both come to the church social next month. Everyone should attend. It is important for newcomers to integrate into the community." "We will certainly consider it," Isaac said, though Beatrice was already shaking her head. After Clara moved on, Beatrice turned to Isaac. "I am not going to a church social." "Why not?" "Because the last social I attended, 3 years ago, a child screamed when he saw me and his mother accused me of deliberately frightening him. Because women clutch their husbands' arms when I walk by. Because I am not welcome at such things." Isaac's expression darkened. "That is ridiculous." "That is reality." They completed their errands in tense silence. On the ride back to Isaac's ranch, Beatrice was lost in thought. Part of her appreciated what Isaac was trying to do, but another part of her resented it. He could not simply force people to accept her. That was not how the world worked. "I am sorry," Isaac said as they reached his property. "I am pushing too hard again. It is not my place to tell you how to live your life." "You are right about that," Beatrice said, but then she sighed. "But I also know you are trying to help. You just do not understand how things are for me here." "Then help me understand." So Beatrice told him. She told him about the months after the fire when she had first come to live in town. How people had been kind at first, but in a pitying, distant way. How children stared and adults looked away. How the unmarried men who used to court her suddenly found excuses to avoid her. How she had slowly withdrawn, unable to bear the constant reminder that she was now something other, something less. "I became invisible," she said. "Or worse than invisible. I became something people saw but did not want to see, if that makes sense." "It makes sense," Isaac said. "But Beatrice, you are not invisible to me. And maybe if we show people that you are still the same person you always were, just with scars, they will start to see that too." "Or maybe they will not," Beatrice said, "but I appreciate your optimism." Over the following weeks, Beatrice found herself spending more and more time at Isaac's ranch. She helped him set up breeding schedules for the mares, advised him on feed and care, and worked with her own mare, whom she had named Hope, a touch of sentimentality she would never admit to Isaac. Despite her initial reluctance, she had to admit that having purpose again felt good. She was using her skills, her knowledge. She was contributing to something instead of simply surviving, and being around Isaac was becoming easier, more natural. They developed a rhythm, a comfortable partnership built on mutual respect and growing affection. Isaac never pushed her about her scars or her past, but he also never let her hide completely. He would ask her opinion on things, defer to her expertise, treat her as an equal in every way. One evening, as they were finishing up the day's work, a violent thunderstorm rolled in with little warning. Lightning cracked across the sky and rain began to pour down in sheets. "You should stay," Isaac said, raising his voice over the sound of the storm. "It is not safe to ride in this." Beatrice knew he was right. Riding in a thunderstorm, especially in this terrain, was dangerous. "I will sleep in the barn," she said. "You will sleep in the house," Isaac corrected. "You can have my bed, I will sleep on the floor." "Isaac, that is not necessary. It is the only proper thing to do. I am not letting you sleep in the barn when there is a perfectly good bed inside." They ran for the house, both of them soaked within seconds. Inside, Isaac grabbed towels and started a fire in the small stove to ward off the sudden chill. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Isaac said, then immediately colored. "I mean, I will give you something dry to wear. I will turn around." Despite the awkwardness of the situation, Beatrice felt a smile tug at her lips. Isaac was always so careful to be proper, to treat her with respect. It was endearing. He gave her one of his shirts and a pair of pants that she had to roll up several times. When she emerged from the small bedroom, Isaac had also changed into dry clothes and was making coffee. "Quite the storm," he said, looking out the window at the flashes of lightning illuminating the darkness. Beatrice joined him at the window, watching the display. "It is beautiful in a way." "Dangerous but beautiful." "Like many things," Isaac said quietly, and when she turned to look at him, he was watching her, not the storm. "Isaac," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "I have been for weeks now. And I know I probably should not say anything. I know you probably do not feel the same way, but I cannot keep pretending. Every day I spend with you, I find something else to admire. Your knowledge, your strength, your resilience, your dry sense of humor. The way you care for the horses, the way you see the beauty in broken things. I love all of it, I love you." Beatrice stepped back, her heart pounding. You cannot love me." "Why not?" "Because look at me." She gestured to her scarred face, her voice rising with emotion. "I am damaged, Isaac. I am broken. You should want someone whole, someone beautiful, someone who will not make people stare when you walk down the street together." "You are beautiful," Isaac said firmly, "and you are not broken. You are scarred, yes, but that is not the same thing. To the rest of the world it is. Then the rest of the world is wrong." Isaac took a step toward her, and she did not back away. "Beatrice, I see you, all of you. The scars, yes, but also the incredible woman underneath, and I love what I see." "You will change your mind," Beatrice said, tears starting to fall. "Eventually, you will want a normal life, a normal wife, children who are not afraid of their own mother." "I want a life with you," Isaac said, That is the only normal I need." Beatrice shook her head, unable to speak. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope. But the fear was too great, the risk too high. If she let herself love him, let herself believe this was possible, and then he left, she would not survive it. "I cannot," she whispered. "I am sorry, Isaac, but I cannot." She grabbed her wet clothes and ran for the door. Isaac called after her, but she did not stop. She ran out into the storm, the rain mixing with her tears. She had to get away, had to protect herself before she made the mistake of believing in something impossible, but she did not go home. Instead, she went to the barn and climbed into the loft, wrapping herself in the dry blankets stored there. Below her, the horses shifted and nickered softly. She could hear Isaac calling for her, heard him check the barn, but the loft was dark, and he did not see her huddled in the shadows. Eventually, he went back to the house. Beatrice lay in the loft, listening to the rain hammer on the roof, and let herself cry properly for the first time since the fire. She cried for her lost family, for her lost face, for the life she would never have. And she cried for Isaac, for the love she wanted but was too afraid to accept. As the storm slowly passed and exhaustion finally claimed her, Beatrice made a decision. She would stay away from Isaac's ranch. It was too dangerous, too tempting. She would focus on hope, on building her own future alone. It was safer that way. Lonelier, but safer. The next few days, Beatrice did exactly that. She stayed at her cabin, working with hope in her small corral, avoiding town, avoiding Isaac. It felt like going back to her old life, the isolated existence she had known before Isaac arrived. And it was terrible. She had forgotten in just those few weeks with Isaac how crushing the loneliness could be, how the silence pressed down on her, how each day bled into the next with nothing to mark their passing. She had gotten used to conversation, to laughter, to feeling like a person again instead of a ghost. On the fourth day, there was a knock at her door. She knew it would be Isaac before she opened it. He looked tired, worried. "You have been avoiding me." "Yes." "Because I told you I loved you." "Yes." Isaac sighed. "Beatrice, I am not going to pressure you or force you into anything, but I need you to know that I meant what I said, and I am not going anywhere. I am not going to change my mind or wake up one day and decide you are not worth it. You are worth everything to me." "You barely know me," Beatrice protested weakly. "I know you better than you think. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar. I know you prefer working in the early morning when everything is quiet. I know you talk to the horses like they are people. I know you have nightmares sometimes, because I have heard you cry out in your sleep when you have dozed off in the barn. I know you are scared to let anyone close because you are terrified of being hurt again. I know all of that, Beatrice, and I love you anyway." Beatrice felt her resolve crumbling. What if people are cruel? What if they say terrible things? Then we will face it together. What if you wake up one day and realize you made a mistake? That is not going to happen. But what if it does? Isaac stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. What if it does not? What if we are happy? What if we build a life together, raise horses, maybe even raise children who know that the most important things in life are kindness and love, not what someone looks like? What if we prove everyone wrong, Beatrice? What if we get to be happy? Beatrice looked up at him, at his honest face, his hopeful eyes. "I am so scared," she whispered. "I know," Isaac said gently. "But you are also the bravest person I know. You survived a fire that killed your family. You kept going when most people would have given up. You can survive this too. You can survive being loved." And suddenly, Beatrice realized he was right. She had survived the worst thing she could imagine. She had lived through pain and loss and isolation. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive hope too. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out. "I've been trying so hard not to, but I do. I love you, Isaac Taylor." Isaac's face broke into the most beautiful smile Beatrice had ever seen. "May I kiss you?" Beatrice nodded, her heart racing. Isaac cupped her face gently in his hands, both sides, scarred and unscarred, and kissed her softly. It was the first time anyone had kissed her since before the fire, the first time anyone had touched her scars with anything other than pity or disgust. And it was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So," Isaac said, "does this mean you will come back to work with me?" Beatrice laughed, the sound feeling foreign but wonderful. "I suppose I have to. Someone needs to make sure you do not ruin those horses." "Very true," Isaac agreed. "I am hopeless without you." They stood on her small porch, holding hands and watching the sun begin to set. There was still a long road ahead, Beatrice knew. There would still be stares and whispers. There would still be people who did not understand. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she might have a future worth looking forward to. Over the following months, Beatrice and Isaac's relationship deepened. They worked side by side on the ranch, building up the horse breeding operation. Word spread about the quality of their stock, and buyers started coming from surrounding territories. The people of Tropic slowly grew accustomed to seeing them together. Some remained cold, some remained curious, but a few began to come around. Clara Simmons made a point of always greeting Beatrice when she came to town. A few of the other women started doing the same. "You see," Isaac said one day after a particularly pleasant trip to the general store, "people are coming around." "Some people," Beatrice corrected. But she had to admit it was getting easier. Not easy, but easier. 6 months after their first kiss, Isaac proposed. It was nothing fancy, just the two of them on the porch of what had become their shared home, watching the sunset paint the cliffs red and gold. "Marry me," he said simply. "Be my wife, my partner, my everything." "Yes," Beatrice said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in a small ceremony at the ranch with only a handful of people attending. Clara Simmons and her husband came, as did Tom Peterson from the horse ranch, and a few of the other ranchers Isaac had befriended. It was not the large wedding Beatrice had once dreamed of as a girl, but it was perfect for who she was now. Isaac had a ring made for her by the town jeweler, a simple silver band engraved with a pattern of horses running wild. When he slipped it on her finger, Beatrice felt like the luckiest woman alive. Their wedding night was tender and sweet. Isaac was patient with Beatrice's nervousness, gentle with her scarred body. He kissed every inch of her, scars and all, making her feel beautiful in a way she had thought impossible. "You are stunning," he whispered against her skin. "Every part of you." And for the first time, Beatrice allowed herself to believe it might be true. Not because her scars had disappeared or because she looked the way she once had, but because Isaac loved her exactly as she was. And that love made her beautiful in ways that went beyond the physical. Their first year of marriage was hard work but deeply fulfilling. The horse operation grew steadily. Hope, Beatrice's mare, had a strong, healthy foal that showed excellent promise. They added more breeding stock and built additional corrals, but more importantly, they built a life together. They had quiet mornings and busy afternoons. They had arguments about the best way to train a colt and long conversations about everything and nothing. They had laughter and love, and the kind of companionship that comes from truly knowing another person. The nightmares that had plagued Beatrice for years began to fade. She still dreamed of the fire sometimes, still woke up gasping and afraid. But now Isaac was there to hold her, to remind her she was safe, to chase the darkness away. In their second year of marriage, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and terror. She wanted a child desperately, but she was also afraid. What if the baby is scared of me? She asked Isaac one night, her hands resting on her barely swollen belly. That is impossible, Isaac said firmly. This baby will know you from the very beginning. You will be warmth and safety and love. Your face will be the first face they see, and it will be the most beautiful face in the world to them. You are biased, Beatrice said, but she was smiling. Completely, Isaac agreed, kissing her forehead. As her pregnancy progressed, Beatrice found herself cautiously embracing the changes in her body. The roundness of her belly, the flutter of movement inside her. It felt like hope, like possibility, like a future she had thought was lost forever. When her time came in the early spring of 1886, the labor was long and difficult. Clara Simmons served as midwife, having delivered most of the babies in Tropic over the past decade. "You are doing wonderfully," Clara encouraged as Beatrice panted through another contraction. "Not much longer now." Isaac held Beatrice's hand, looking nearly as exhausted as she felt. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and screaming, Beatrice burst into tears. "A boy," Clara announced, wrapping the baby in clean blankets. "A strong, healthy boy." She placed the infant in Beatrice's arms, and Beatrice stared down at her son in wonder. He was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a full head of dark hair like Isaac's. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mother." The baby stopped crying at the sound of her voice, his unfocused eyes trying to find her face. Isaac leaned over them both, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Isaac said, "just like his mother." They named him James after Beatrice's father. Isaac's prediction proved correct. As James grew, Beatrice's scarred face was simply his mother's face. He showed no fear, no hesitation. When he was old enough to notice that she looked different from other people, he asked about it with the frank curiosity of a child. "Mama has special marks," Beatrice explained, keeping it simple. "From when I was hurt a long time ago." "Oh," James said, reaching up to touch her face with his chubby toddler hand. "I like your marks. They make you look brave." Beatrice hugged him close, overwhelmed with love for this little boy who saw her so clearly. Life continued, busy and full. James grew into a lively, curious child who loved the horses and followed Isaac around the ranch like a shadow. 2 years after James was born, Beatrice gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Emma. The births were easier this time, and the girls were healthy and strong. The ranch continued to prosper. Isaac and Beatrice became known throughout the territory for their excellent horses. Buyers came from as far as Colorado and Arizona to purchase their stock. They hired help, expanding the operation beyond what either of them had initially dreamed possible. On James's 5th birthday, they threw a party at the ranch. Beatrice had been nervous about it, worried that parents would not want their children around her. But to her surprise, nearly every family in Tropic showed up. The children ran wild around the property, playing games and eating cake. And not one of them seemed bothered by Beatrice's scars. "You see," Clara Simmons said, standing beside Beatrice and watching the chaos with amusement. "Children follow their parents' lead. Your family has become part of this community. You and Isaac have earned people's respect through your hard work and good character. The scars do not matter nearly as much as you thought they did." "Some people still stare," Beatrice said. "Some people always will," Clara agreed. "But most people see a successful rancher, a devoted mother, and a kind woman. That is who you are, Beatrice. The scars are just part of your history, not your identity." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. She had never thought she would hear words like that, never thought she would be accepted this way. It was not the same as before the fire. She would never be unmarked again. But she was no longer invisible, no longer an object of pity or fear. She was simply Beatrice Taylor, rancher, wife, mother, member of the community. That night, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Beatrice and Isaac sat on their porch. It had become their place, this porch, where they had shared so many important moments. Happy? Isaac asked, taking her hand. More than I ever thought possible, Beatrice admitted. You were right, Isaac, about all of it, about people coming around, about building a life together, about being happy. We were both right, Isaac corrected. You were right that it would not be easy. But we did it together, and that made all the difference. Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, looking out at the land they had built their life on. The red cliffs glowed in the moonlight, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the horses moving in their corrals. I wish my family could have known you, she said softly, could have seen this life we built. I think they know, Isaac said, and I think they are proud of you. I know I am. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. James grew into a young man who shared his mother's love of horses and his father's steady temperament. The twins, inseparable as always, developed their own interests. Sarah loved working with the horses like her mother, while Emma preferred helping Isaac with the business side of the ranch. When James was 14, he came home from town one day looking troubled. "What is wrong?" Beatrice asked, recognizing the expression on his face. "A man in town said something about you," James said hesitantly. "About your scars. He said you looked like a monster." Beatrice felt her stomach drop, the old pain rising up. But before she could respond, James continued. "So I told him he was wrong. I told him my mother was the strongest, kindest person I knew, and if he had a problem with how she looked, that said more about him than about her." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," James said firmly, "because it is true, and because you taught me to stand up for what is right." Beatrice pulled her son into a hug. This boy, this young man who had never known a moment of shame about his mother's appearance, who defended her without hesitation. It was more than she had ever hoped for. That evening she told Isaac about the incident. "He is a good boy," Isaac said proudly. "We raised him right." "We did," Beatrice agreed. "All three of them. They are growing up to be good people." As their children moved into young adulthood, Beatrice and Isaac found themselves with more time to focus on each other again. They took long rides through the territory, just the two of them, reminiscing about their early days. "You remember when you first came to town?" Beatrice asked one day as they rode through the desert. "When you asked me to show you the land?" "I remember being desperate for someone to talk to me like a human being," Isaac said, "and then there you were, all prickly and defensive but willing to help anyway." "I was so afraid of you seeing my face," Beatrice admitted. "I begged you not to look at me." "But I did look," Isaac said. "And I saw exactly what I needed to see, a beautiful woman with a beautiful heart." "You are still the only person who has ever made me believe that," Beatrice said. "That is not true anymore," Isaac corrected gently. "Our children believe it. The people in town believe it. But most importantly, you believe it now too." He was right. Somewhere over the years, Beatrice had stopped seeing herself through the lens of her scars. She still noticed them, of course. They were impossible to ignore, but they were no longer the defining feature of her existence. She was so much more than her scars. She was a mother, a wife, a rancher, a friend. When Beatrice was 45 and Isaac was 48, they welcomed their first grandchild. James had married a lovely young woman named Catherine, and their daughter was born in the spring. They named her Grace, and Beatrice held her tiny granddaughter with tears streaming down her face. "She is perfect," Beatrice whispered. "Like her grandmother," Catherine said warmly. Over the years, Catherine had become like a daughter to Beatrice, never once showing any discomfort with her scars. As Grace grew, She loved sitting in Beatrice's lap and tracing the patterns of scars on her grandmother's face and arm. "Tell me the story, Grandma," Grace would say. And Beatrice would tell her, in age-appropriate ways, about the fire, about surviving, about meeting Isaac, about learning that life could still be beautiful even after terrible things happened. "You are the bravest person I know," Grace would say, just as James had said years before. More grandchildren followed. Sarah married a rancher from a neighboring territory and had 2 sons. Emma married the town doctor and had 3 daughters. The house that Beatrice and Isaac had built together, the life they had created, expanded to include this new generation. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Beatrice with a trip back to the Anderson property, where he had first started his ranch, where they had first fallen in love. Much had changed. The original small house had been expanded several times. The corrals were numerous and well-maintained. The barn was larger, sturdier, but the porch was still there, the place where Isaac had first told her he loved her. They sat there now, older and grayer but still deeply in love. 25 years, Isaac said, shaking his head in wonder. "It feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time." "I know what you mean," Beatrice said. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to have this, have you, have our family." "You deserve every bit of it," Isaac said firmly. "You have worked hard, loved fiercely, and overcome more than most people could imagine. You deserve every happiness." "We deserve it," Beatrice corrected. "This was not just my journey, Isaac. It was ours. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "No," Isaac said gently. "You saved yourself. I just loved you while you did it." As the sun set over the red cliffs, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Beatrice thought about how far she had come. From the broken, scared woman who had begged Isaac not to look at her, to the confident grandmother who lived a full, rich life. The scars were still there. They always would be, but they no longer defined her. She thought about all the people who had touched her life. Isaac, of course, who had seen past her burns to her heart. Her children, who had never known a moment of shame about their mother's appearance. Her grandchildren, who traced her scars with loving fingers. The people of Tropic, who had slowly learned to see her as a person, not a curiosity. Even Clara Simmons, who had shown up to deliver James all those years ago and had become an unexpected friend. All of them had helped her become who she was now. But ultimately, Beatrice knew the journey had been her own. She had chosen to let Isaac in. She had chosen to take a chance on love. She had chosen to keep living even when it felt impossible. The years continued to pass, gentle and good. Beatrice and Isaac grew older together, their hair turning silver, their bodies slowing down. But their love remained strong, deepened by decades of shared experiences, weathered storms, and countless small moments of joy. When Beatrice was 63, she fell ill with pneumonia. For a few frightening days, Isaac feared he might lose her. But true to form, Beatrice fought her way back to health with fierce determination. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," she told Isaac when she was finally out of danger, her voice hoarse but teasing. "I should hope not," Isaac said, his relief evident in every word. "I am not done with you yet." They had several more good years together, years filled with family gatherings and quiet evenings on the porch. Years of watching their grandchildren grow and begin to start families of their own. Years of working the land they both loved, though they left most of the heavy work to younger hands now. On a warm evening in the spring of 1919, when Beatrice was 66 and Isaac was 69, they sat on their porch together, holding hands and watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. "You remember what you said to me, that first day I told you I loved you?" Isaac asked. I said a lot of things, Beatrice replied, most of them foolish. You said you were damaged, broken. Beatrice squeezed his hand. I was wrong. Yes, you were, Isaac agreed. You were never broken, you were just healing. We both were, Beatrice said, and we healed each other. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the cliffs, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Beatrice felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had not turned out the way she had imagined as a young girl before the fire. It had been harder in some ways, full of challenges she never could have anticipated. But it had also been more beautiful than she ever could have dreamed. More full of love, more rich with meaning, more blessed with joy. The scars were still there, would always be there. But they had become simply part of her story, not the end of it. She had been loved, truly and completely loved, by a man who saw past the surface to the heart beneath. She had raised 3 children who were good and kind and strong. She had built a successful business and earned the respect of her community. She had survived, and more than that, she had thrived. Isaac's voice broke into her thoughts. What are you thinking about? Everything, Beatrice said honestly. Our whole life together, how grateful I am for all of it. Even the hard parts, even those, Beatrice confirmed, because they made the good parts even more precious. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who knew each other so well that words were often unnecessary. Around them, the ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms. Horses shifting in their stalls, the distant call of a night bird, the gentle sound of the wind moving through the juniper trees. I love you, Beatrice Taylor, Isaac said, just as he had said countless times over their 34 years of marriage. I love you too, Isaac Taylor, Beatrice replied, just as she always did. And in that moment on that porch under the vast Utah sky, 2 people who had found each other against all odds simply existed together. Scarred and whole, weathered and strong, grateful for every day they had been given. The story could have ended there, with that perfect moment of contentment. But life is not made of single moments, no matter how beautiful. It is made of days and months and years, of the ongoing work of living and loving and being present. Isaac lived another 6 years, passing away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75. Beatrice held his hand as he took his last breath, her heart breaking even as she whispered that it was all right to let go. The grief was profound, a physical ache that threatened to overwhelm her. But Beatrice had learned long ago how to survive loss. She let herself mourn, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of Isaac in their faces, their mannerisms, their hearts. After the funeral, James found his mother sitting on the porch staring out at the land. "Are you all right, Mama?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I will be," Beatrice said. "Your father taught me that it is possible to keep going even when you think you cannot. I will honor his memory by doing exactly that." And she did. Beatrice lived another 12 years, remaining active in the ranch and deeply involved in her family's lives. She taught her great-grandchildren about horses, told them stories about their grandfather, and continued to be a pillar of strength for everyone around her. She never remarried. There could never be anyone else after Isaac. But she was not lonely. How could she be, surrounded by so much love? Her house was always full of family, her days always busy, her heart always grateful. When Beatrice passed away in her sleep at the age of 78, in the year 1931, it was in the house she and Isaac had built together, in the bed they had shared for so many years. Her children found her in the morning, peaceful and still, a slight smile on her face as though she had seen something wonderful in her dreams. Perhaps she had seen Isaac, waiting for her on the other side. Perhaps she had seen her parents and brother, lost so long ago in the fire. Or perhaps she had simply slipped away with the satisfaction of a life fully lived, of love fully experienced, of a journey completed with grace and courage. At her funeral, the church in Tropic was packed with people whose lives she had touched. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, of course, but also neighbors, fellow ranchers, townspeople who remembered the scared young woman she had been and marveled at the strong matriarch she had become. James spoke at the service, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother taught us many things," he said. "She taught us how to work hard, how to love the land, how to treat animals with kindness. But most importantly, she taught us that our value is not determined by our appearance or by what others think of us. It is determined by the content of our character, the strength of our hearts, and the depth of our love. She lived that lesson every day of her life, and we are all better people for having known her." After the service, as the family gathered at the ranch for the reception, Sarah pulled out a box she had found while going through her mother's things. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Isaac in Beatrice's neat handwriting. "I think she wrote these after Papa died," Sarah said softly, "to feel close to him." Catherine, James's wife, picked up one of the letters and read it aloud with permission from the others. "My dearest Isaac," it began. "Today Grace asked me to tell her the story of how we met. She has heard it 100 times, but she never tires of it, and I never tire of telling it because it is the story of how my life changed, of how I went from existing to truly living. You remember how frightened I was, how I begged you not to look at me. I was so certain that my scars made me unworthy of love, of happiness, of any kind of normal life. But you looked anyway. You saw past the burns to my heart and you loved what you found there. You gave me the courage to love myself. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me everything, Isaac. And even though you are gone now, I carry you with me every single day. I see you in James's steady presence, in Sarah's love of the horses, in Emma's quick mind. I see you in our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The scars are still here, faded now with age but still visible. But when I look in the mirror, I do not see them the way I used to. I see a woman who was loved, a woman who loved in return, a woman who built a good life out of tragedy, and that is the greatest gift you ever gave me, my love. Not just your love, though that was precious beyond measure, but the ability to see myself through your eyes as someone worthy of that love. I will see you again soon, I think. I am getting older and I am tired, but I am not afraid. How could I be afraid when I know you are waiting? Until then, I will continue the work we started together. I will love our family, tend our land, and honor the legacy we built. All my love, always and forever, Beatrice." There was not a dry eye in the room when Catherine finished reading. The letter captured everything that Beatrice and Isaac had meant to each other, the profound impact their love had on both their lives. In the years that followed, Beatrice's story became something of a legend in the Taylor family. Parents told their children about the grandmother who had survived a fire, who had overcome tremendous obstacles, who had found love and happiness when the world told her it was impossible. The ranch continued to operate, passed down through the generations, each new generation adding their own chapter to the story. The porch where Beatrice and Isaac had spent so many evenings remained a special place. Family members would sit there during gatherings, looking out at the red cliffs and remembering the two people who had started it all. A small plaque was eventually installed with a simple inscription. Here Beatrice and Isaac built their love and their legacy. May we honor their memory by living with courage, loving with our whole hearts, and seeing the beauty in all things. Decades later, when Tropic was no longer a frontier town but a small, established community, when the Wild West had given way to modern conveniences and paved roads, people still remembered the story of Beatrice and Isaac Taylor. It became a reminder that love could transcend physical appearance, that scars did not define a person's worth, that courage and determination could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. The ranch itself stood as a testament to what they had built together. Though it changed hands eventually, moving beyond the Taylor family, it remained a working horse ranch. And somewhere in the breeding lines of many of the horses in that part of Utah could be traced back to Hope, Beatrice's first mare, and the other horses she and Isaac had so carefully bred and raised. The story of Beatrice and Isaac was one of those rare love stories that felt both extraordinary and universal. Extraordinary in its specific details, the fire and the scars and the Wild West setting, but universal in its themes of overcoming fear, finding acceptance, building a life with someone who truly saw you for who you were. It was a story about looking past the surface to see what truly mattered, about choosing love even when it felt risky, about the healing power of being seen and accepted exactly as you are, and ultimately, it was a story about hope, about the possibility of finding beauty and joy and love even after the worst has happened, about the resilience of the human heart and its capacity to heal and grow and embrace life again. That message, passed down through generations of the Taylor family, touched countless lives. It gave courage to people facing their own challenges, their own scars, whether physical or emotional. It reminded them that their value was not determined by their appearance or their circumstances, but by who they chose to be and how they chose to love, in the end. That was the true legacy of Beatrice and Isaac Taylor. Not just the ranch they built or the family they raised, but the example they set. An example of seeing past the surface, of loving fully and without reservation, of believing that everyone deserves to be truly seen and cherished for who they are. And so their story lived on, told and retold, adapted and embellished, but always true at its core. The story of a cowboy who looked past a woman's burns to see her beautiful heart. The story of a woman who found the courage to let herself be seen, be loved, be happy. The story of two people who built a life together out of loss and pain and determination, and created something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone.